I understood when my parents said, "We just can't afford anything for your wedding." I cried, but I let it go, until my sister accidentally tagged my mom in a post, "The best house gift ever, the best family ever." My heart sank, they lied to me. When I tried to confront them, my sister barked, "Why do you even show up? It should have been enough when our parents told you they couldn't afford it. Why do you always beg for something that was never yours?" My mother added coldly, "Stop acting like a victim, you'll never be the favorite here." My father slammed his hand on the table, "Show some respect and leave before you embarrass yourself further." I stayed silent, swallowing every tear, until days later, my parents forwarded me the mortgage payment notice with a message, "Pay it off now, or don't bother calling yourself our daughter." That's when I finally snapped. I'm Sarah, 28F, and I have a younger sister Madison, 24F. We grew up in what I thought was a normal middle-class family in Ohio. My parents, Robert and Linda, always seemed to favor Madison, but I chalked it up to her being the baby of the family. I was the responsible one, straight A's, full scholarship to college, worked part-time jobs since I was 16 to help with expenses. Madison was the free spirit who could do no wrong in their eyes. Fast forward to last year when I got engaged to my boyfriend Jake of 4 years. He's an amazing guy, works as a software engineer, treats me like a queen, and we've been saving up for our wedding for 2 years. We weren't asking for anything extravagant, just a small ceremony with close family and friends. The venue we wanted was $8,000, and we had saved $6,000 ourselves. We just needed that extra $2,000 to make our dream wedding happen. When I approached my parents about potentially helping with the wedding costs, they sat me down in their living room with these serious expressions. My mom was wringing her hands, and my dad looked like he was about to deliver terrible news. "Sarah, honey," my mom started, her voice shaky. "We've been looking at our finances, and we just can't afford anything for your wedding. Money's been really tight with your father's hours being cut at the factory, and we've got our own bills to worry about." My dad nodded solemnly. "We're barely making ends meet as it is. The mortgage payments have been killing us, and we've got credit card debt piling up. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, but we just don't have $2,000 to spare." I felt my heart sink, but I understood. Or at least, I thought I did. These were my parents, and they had never lied to me before. If they said they couldn't afford it, then they couldn't afford it. I hugged them both and told them it was okay, that Jake and I would figure something out. That night, I cried myself to sleep. Not because I felt entitled to their money, but because I had always imagined my parents being part of making my wedding day special. I had dreamed of my dad walking me down the aisle, knowing that my family had helped make the day possible. But I swallowed my disappointment and started looking into cheaper venues. Jake and I ended up having a beautiful ceremony at a local park pavilion that cost us $500 to rent. It wasn't the venue I had dreamed of, but it was perfect in its own way. My parents came, smiled, took pictures, and acted like everything was normal. I thought we had moved past the whole money situation. 3 months after my wedding, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a post that made my blood run cold. It was Madison, posting a picture of herself standing in front of a gorgeous new Jeep Wrangler, the exact model she had been obsessing over for months. The caption read, "The best house gift ever, the best family ever. So grateful for parents who always come through. #blessed, #new car, #family love." But here's the kicker, she had tagged my mom in the post. My mom had liked it and commented with heart emojis and anything for our baby girl. I stared at my phone screen, reading the post over and over again. A new Jeep Wrangler. Those cost at least $35,000. My parents had bought my sister a $35,000 car just 3 months after telling me they couldn't afford to help with my $2,000 wedding shortfall. I felt like I was going to throw up. All those nights I had reassured myself that my parents were just in a tough financial spot, that they would have helped if they could. All those times I had defended them to Jake when he said it was weird that they didn't contribute anything to our wedding. I had been such an idiot. My hands were shaking as I screenshot the post and sent it to Jake. He called me immediately. "Sarah, what the hell is this?" he said, his voice tight with anger. "I don't know," I whispered. "I honestly don't know. They bought her a car that costs more than our entire wedding budget, and they told you they were broke? Sarah, this is insane." I couldn't even respond. I was still processing the betrayal. How long had they been planning this? How long had they known they were going to buy Madison a car while telling me they couldn't help with my wedding? I decided I needed to confront them face to face. This wasn't something that could be handled over text or a phone call. I drove to their house that evening, my heart pounding the entire way there. When I knocked on the door, Madison answered, practically bouncing with excitement. "Sarah, did you see my new car? Isn't it gorgeous? Mom and Dad surprised me with it today." "I saw," I said quietly. "Can I come in? I need to talk to everyone." Madison's expression shifted slightly, but she stepped aside to let me in. My parents were in the living room watching TV. When they saw me, they both smiled like nothing was wrong. "Hi, honey," my mom said. "What brings you by?" I took a deep breath. I saw Madison's post about the car. The room went silent. My dad muted the TV, and everyone was looking at me. "That's nice," I continued, my voice starting to shake. "It's a beautiful car. Really expensive, too." "Sarah," my mom started, but I held up my hand. "3 months ago, you told me you couldn't afford to help with my wedding. You said money was tight, that you were barely making ends meet. You said you didn't have $2,000 to spare." My voice was getting louder. "But you had $35,000 for Madison's car?" Madison scoffed. "Why do you even show up? It should have been enough when our parents told you they couldn't afford it. Why do you always beg for something that was never yours?" I stared at her, shocked by the venom in her voice. "Beg? Madison, I asked once, they said no, and I accepted it. I didn't beg for anything." "You're begging right now," she shot back. "Standing here acting like you deserve something that was never meant for you." My mother stepped forward, her face cold in a way I had never seen before. "Stop acting like a victim, you'll never be the favorite here." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own mother had just told me, to my face, that I would never be her favorite child. That all those years of trying to be the perfect daughter, the responsible one, the one who never caused trouble, it had all been meaningless. "Mom," I whispered, tears starting to fall. "How can you say that to me?" My father suddenly slammed his hand on the coffee table, making everyone jump. "Show some respect and leave before you embarrass yourself further." I stood there, frozen, as my entire family stared at me with looks ranging from disgust to indifference. These people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had just made it clear that their love came with conditions I could never meet. I didn't say another word. I turned around and walked out of that house, got in my car, and drove home in complete silence. When I got inside, Jake took one look at me and wrapped me in his arms while I sobbed. "They said I'll never be the favorite," I cried into his chest. "My own mother said that to me." Jake held me tighter. "Sarah, they don't deserve you. They never did." The confrontation replayed in my mind over and over again. My mother's cold words, "You'll never be the favorite here," echoed constantly. How do you recover from hearing your own parents say something like that? How do you move forward knowing that the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally had just told you that their love came with rankings? I called in sick to work for 3 days. I couldn't function. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Jake was worried about me, but I couldn't even explain what I was feeling. It wasn't just hurt or anger, it was grief. I was grieving the loss of parents I had never actually had, mourning a relationship that had been one-sided my entire life. On the second day, I started going through old family documents and photos, looking for something, evidence, maybe, or just trying to understand when things had gone so wrong. What I found was even more damaging than I had expected. In a box of old paperwork, I discovered financial records from when I was in college. I found receipts showing that my parents had spent over $15,000 on Madison's high school graduation party, the party they told me was just a small family thing when I couldn't afford to fly home from college to attend. That same year, they had refused to help me with my textbook expenses, telling me I needed to learn to budget better. I found credit card statements showing expensive shopping trips with Madison, spa days, weekend getaways to Chicago and Detroit. During this same period, I was working 2 jobs while taking a full course load, and when I asked if they could help with my car repair bill, they told me I needed to learn to handle my own responsibilities. But the most devastating discovery was a folder labeled Madison's college fund that contained bank statements showing they had been saving for her education since she was born. The account had over $80,000 in it by the time she started college. I had never known this account existed. When I started college, they told me they couldn't afford to help and that I needed to figure out financial aid on my own. I had worked my ass off to get scholarships and grants, taking out student loans for the rest. I had graduated with $30,000 in debt while Madison would graduate debt-free with money left over. They hadn't been unable to help me. They had chosen not to help me. I called my college roommate, Amy, who had stayed in touch with our mutual friends from school. "Amy, do you remember when I was stressing about money junior year? When I was working those 2 jobs and barely sleeping? Of course I remember. We were all worried about you. You looked exhausted all the time, and you kept missing social events because you couldn't afford them. Did I ever mention my parents having financial problems? Sarah, you talked about how broke your parents were constantly. You said that's why you couldn't ask them for help with anything. We all felt bad for you because it seemed like you were struggling while your parents were struggling too. But Amy, I said slowly, I just found evidence that they had saved over $80,000 for Madison's college fund. They weren't broke. They just didn't want to spend money on me. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Sarah, Amy finally said, her voice quiet. That's horrible. Why would they let you struggle like that if they had money? Because Madison was always more important. That conversation led me to call other friends from college, people who had witnessed my financial struggles firsthand. The picture that emerged was horrifying. For 4 years, I had been the friend who couldn't afford to join group dinners, who wore the same clothes constantly, who worked weekends instead of socializing. Everyone had felt sorry for me because they thought my family was genuinely struggling. Meanwhile, Madison had been living it up. I looked at her social media from those same years and saw constant shopping hauls, expensive vacations, sorority events that cost hundreds of dollars. While I was eating ramen noodles and working every spare hour, she was posting about her new designer handbags and spring break trips. The betrayal went so much deeper than just the wedding money. It was decades of systematic favoritism that I had been too blind to see. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Martinez, who specialized in family dysfunction. In our first session, I laid out the whole situation, the wedding, the car, the confrontation, and everything I had discovered since then. Sarah, she said gently, what you're describing is a classic case of narcissistic family dynamics. You were the scapegoat child, and Madison was the golden child. This wasn't random or accidental, it was a deliberate pattern of behavior. But why me? What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. In families like this, the roles are assigned early and they stick. You were probably chosen as the scapegoat because you were responsible and resilient. You could handle the neglect and still function, so they felt safe treating you poorly. Madison was chosen as the golden child possibly because she was more emotionally needy or because she reinforced your parents' egos in some way. So there was never anything I could have done to earn their love? Their love was never actually available to be earned, Sarah. What you were trying to earn was acknowledgement and fair treatment, which should have been your birthright as their daughter. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that my parents' behavior wasn't going to change. Narcissistic parents don't suddenly develop empathy or start treating their scapegoat children fairly. If anything, they get worse when their behavior is challenged. If you decide to maintain a relationship with them, she explained, it needs to be on your terms, with firm boundaries and realistic expectations. But you also need to prepare yourself for the possibility that a healthy relationship with them might not be possible. I was still processing all of this when something happened that pushed me over the edge completely. Jake and I had decided to start trying for a baby, and I was excited about the possibility of becoming a mother. Despite everything that had happened with my parents, I still had some naive hope that maybe a grandchild would change things, that maybe they would want to be involved and we could build a new kind of relationship. I decided to call my mom to share the news that we were trying to conceive. I thought maybe this could be a fresh start, a chance for them to show me that I mattered to them. Mom, I wanted to let you know that Jake and I are planning to start trying for a baby soon. Oh, that's nice, honey, she said in the same tone she might use to acknowledge that I had told her about the weather. I thought you might be excited about the possibility of becoming a grandmother. Well, we'll see what happens. You know pregnancies don't always work out. I was shocked by her response. When Madison had mentioned possibly getting a dog with her boyfriend, my mom had been more enthusiastic. Mom, I just thought you'd want to know. Of course, dear. Oh, speaking of babies, Madison called yesterday to tell us about her friend's baby shower. She's going to be a bridesmaid in another wedding too. She has such a busy social life. Even my potential future children were being overshadowed by Madison's social calendar. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 2 days later when Madison called me directly. Sarah, Mom told me about your baby plans. Yeah, we're excited about it. Look, I need to be honest with you about something. Mom and Dad are really upset about this whole wedding situation and the way you've been acting lately. They're worried about what kind of mother you'd be if you're this selfish with your own family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Madison, they lied to me about not having money for my wedding while buying you a $35,000 car. How is it selfish for me to be hurt by that? You're not seeing the big picture, Sarah. They've done so much for you over the years. They let you live at home rent-free after college. They helped you move into your apartment. Madison, I lived at home for 6 months while I saved money for a deposit, and I paid them $400 a month in rent. And they didn't help me move. Jake and his friends did all the work while mom and dad watched. You always remember things differently than everyone else. That phrase hit me like a truck. You always remember things differently. It was something my parents had said to me countless times over the years whenever I tried to bring up instances where I had been treated unfairly. They had gaslit me into believing that my memory was unreliable, that my perceptions were wrong, that I was being overly sensitive. But I wasn't remembering things differently. I was remembering them accurately, and that accuracy was threatening to their narrative that they were good, fair parents. Madison, I have bank statements and receipts that prove what I'm saying. Whatever, Sarah. The point is, Mom and Dad think you should wait on having kids until you mature a little bit. They don't think you're ready for that kind of responsibility. The audacity was breathtaking. The same parents who had funded Madison's party lifestyle and bought her expensive cars were questioning my readiness for parenthood because I had dared to call them out on their lies. Did they ask you to call me and say this? Madison was quiet for a moment. They're just worried about you. We all are. No, Madison. You're not worried about me. You're worried that I'm finally seeing through the family dynamics that have benefited you for your entire life. That's not fair. You know what's not fair? 28 years of being treated like the less important daughter. 28 years of watching you get everything handed to you while I worked for scraps. 28 years of being told I remember things wrong when I tried to point out the obvious favoritism. Sarah, you're being dramatic. Am I? Madison, when was the last time Mom and Dad came to visit my apartment? I don't know. I don't keep track of their visits. Never. They've never been to my apartment. I've lived there for 3 years, and they've never once come to see my home. But they help you move into your dorm room, they help you move into your sorority house, they help you move into your apartment, and they're already talking about helping you find a house to buy after graduation. Madison was quiet. When was the last time they took me out to dinner, just to spend time with me? More silence. When was the last time they called me just to see how I was doing, not because they needed something? Sarah, the answer to all of those questions is never, Madison. But they do all of those things for you regularly. So don't tell me I'm being dramatic when I finally point out that I've been treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. I hung up on her. I was done being gaslit. I was done being told that my perceptions were wrong when I had decades of evidence proving they were right. For the next few days, I tried to process what had happened. I kept thinking maybe I had overreacted, maybe there was some explanation I wasn't seeing. Maybe they had been saving for Madison's car for years, maybe it was different somehow. But then I started really thinking about the mechanics of what they had done. They had bought Madison a $30,000 car in cash. There was no way they could have gotten financing for that amount if they were really struggling financially like they claimed. Banks don't give car loans to people who can't afford their mortgage payments. This meant they had $30,000 sitting in an account somewhere while telling me they were barely making ends meet. I decided to do some investigating. I started by looking up property records online for my parents' house. What I discovered made my stomach turn. According to the county assessor's website, their house was worth approximately $280,000, and they had purchased it 15 years ago for $185,000. Even accounting for their original down payment and 15 years of mortgage payments, they had built up substantial equity in the home. If they were really in financial trouble, they could have easily taken out a home equity loan or refinanced to access some of that equity. The fact that they hadn't suggested they weren't actually in the dire financial straits they had described to me. I also looked up my dad's employer online. The factory where he worked had been doing well according to recent news articles. They had actually expanded their operations and hired more workers in the past year. The story about his hours being cut was starting to sound suspicious. But what really sealed it for me was when I remembered something Madison had posted on social media just 2 weeks before my parents claimed they couldn't afford to help with my wedding. It was a photo of the whole family at an expensive steakhouse downtown, celebrating some minor achievement of Madison's. The bill for that dinner would have easily been $200 to $300, and they had acted like it was no big deal. You don't spend $300 on a celebratory dinner if you're struggling to make ends meet. You don't buy your daughter a $30,000 car if you can't afford to help your other daughter with $2,000 for her wedding. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't about money at all. This was about priorities. Madison was their priority, and I wasn't. It was that simple and that devastating. I started paying closer attention to their social media activity over the next few days, and the pattern became even clearer. My mom regularly shared articles about supporting your children's dreams and being there for family. She posted inspirational quotes about unconditional love and family bonds. The hypocrisy was staggering. Meanwhile, she hadn't liked or commented on a single one of my posts in months. When I had shared photos from my wedding, she had liked them but not commented. When Madison shared a photo of her lunch, my mom would comment with paragraphs about how proud she was and how much she loved her. The differential treatment was so obvious that I couldn't believe I had missed it for so long. But that's the thing about being gaslit your entire life, you lose the ability to trust your own perceptions. You start believing that the way you're being treated is normal, even when it's clearly not. I called my therapist, Dr. Martinez, and scheduled an emergency session. "Sarah, what you're describing is called financial abuse," she explained during our call. "When parents use money as a weapon to control or punish their children, or when they deliberately create financial inequality between siblings, it's a form of emotional abuse." "But they didn't owe me anything," I protested. "It was their money to spend however they wanted." "You're right that they weren't legally obligated to help you. But Sarah, think about the message they sent. They told you they couldn't afford to help with your wedding, one of the most important days of your life, and then immediately spent 15 times that amount on a luxury item for your sister. That's not about obligation. That's about demonstrating where their priorities lie." She helped me understand that this wasn't really about the money itself. It was about what the money represented: love, support, prioritization, and care. By refusing to help me while lavishing expensive gifts on Madison, my parents were sending a clear message about which daughter they valued more. "The cruel part," Dr. Martinez continued, "is that they made you feel guilty for even asking. They framed their refusal as a financial necessity when it was actually a choice. That's manipulative behavior designed to make you feel like you were being unreasonable for wanting equal treatment." After that session, I decided I needed to have one more conversation with my parents. Not to change their minds or to convince them to treat me better, but to clearly communicate my boundaries and expectations moving forward. I called my mom and asked if we could have lunch, just the two of us. She seemed surprised but agreed to meet me at a neutral restaurant the next day. When we sat down, I could tell she was nervous. She kept fidgeting with her napkin and asking if I was okay, if everything was all right with Jake, if there was something wrong. "Mom," I said calmly, "I want to talk about what happened with my wedding in Madison's car." Her face immediately shifted. "Sarah, we've been over this. We explained our financial situation to you." "No, Mom, you lied to me about your financial situation. There's a difference." "We did not lie to you. We told you the truth about what we could afford." "Mom, you bought Madison a $30,000 car 3 months after telling me you couldn't afford $2,000 for my wedding. You spent 15 times more on her luxury than you were willing to spend on my necessity. Those are two completely different situations. How are they different? Explain to me how they're different." She was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling to come up with an explanation that would make sense. "Madison needed reliable transportation for her job search after graduation," she finally said. "Mom, Madison could have gotten reliable transportation for $10,000 or even $15,000. She didn't need a brand new Jeep Wrangler. And more importantly, I needed help with my wedding. That was also a legitimate need. Your wedding was a want, not a need." "And Madison's Jeep was what, exactly?" Another long silence. "Look," I continued, "I'm not here to argue about what you should have done. What's done is done. But I need you to understand that your choices have consequences. The way you've treated me versus the way you treat Madison has damaged our relationship, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise anymore." "Sarah, you're being very dramatic about this." "Am I? Mom, when was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing?" We talk regularly." "When was the last time you visited my apartment?" Silence. "When was the last time you invited me to a family dinner that wasn't a major holiday?" More silence. "When was the last time you celebrated one of my achievements the way you celebrate Madison's?" She was staring at her plate now, refusing to meet my eyes. "These aren't rhetorical questions, Mom. I'm asking because I genuinely can't remember the answers. And that tells me everything I need to know about where I stand in this family. You're taking this all wrong. We love you just as much as we love Madison. If that's true, then you have a very strange way of showing it." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, but it was clear that she wasn't going to acknowledge the disparity in treatment or take responsibility for how it had affected me. She kept deflecting, minimizing, and making excuses. Finally, I said, "Mom, I love you, but I can't keep having a relationship where I'm treated as less important than Madison. If you want to be part of my life going forward, things need to change." "What do you mean, change?" "I mean equal treatment. Equal consideration. Equal respect. If you can't give me that, then we don't have a relationship worth maintaining." She looked shocked. "Sarah, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. I've spent 28 years accepting whatever scraps of attention and affection you were willing to give me. I'm done with that. I deserve better, and I'm finally ready to demand it." When I left that restaurant, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had said what I needed to say. I had set clear boundaries. Now it was up to them to decide how they wanted to respond. I didn't hear from either of my parents for a week after that lunch. Part of me hoped they were reflecting on what I had said, maybe realizing that they needed to change their behavior. But a bigger part of me knew that people like my parents don't change. They just get better at hiding their true nature. I was right about that, as it turned out. Then, exactly 1 week after the confrontation, I received an email that changed everything. The subject line read, "Urgent, mortgage payment required." It was from my parents, but when I opened it, I realized they had forwarded me someone else's email. It was from their mortgage company, and it was a past due notice for their house payment. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the message my parents had typed above the forwarded email: "Pay it off now, or don't bother calling yourself our daughter." I read it 3 times before it sank in. They were demanding that I pay their mortgage. The same parents who had told me they couldn't afford to help with my wedding were now demanding that I pay their house payment. The same parents who had just bought my sister a $35,000 car were now threatening to disown me if I didn't pay their bills. That's when I finally snapped. I called Jake at work and told him everything. He was quiet for a long moment before he said, "Sarah, I think it's time we showed them exactly what kind of daughter they're losing." Here's what I did. First, I called my Aunt Karen, my mom's older sister. She had always been the black sheep of the family, but she was also the most successful. She owned 3 restaurants and had always been kind to me growing up. I told her everything: the wedding situation, Madison's car, the confrontation, and now the mortgage demand. Aunt Karen was furious. "Sarah, honey, I had no idea they were treating you like this. Your grandmother would roll over in her grave if she knew." Then she told me something that made everything click into place. "You know, your parents came to me 6 months ago asking for money. They said it was for home repairs, but they needed $40,000. I told them I couldn't loan that kind of money without knowing what it was really for. $40,000? The exact amount that would cover Madison's car and have money left over. Aunt Karen," I said, "would you be willing to help me with something?" The plan we came up with was beautiful in its simplicity. Aunt Karen called my parents and told them she had reconsidered their loan request. She said she was willing to loan them $40,000, but only if they met with her financial advisor first to go over their budget and make sure they could afford the payments. My parents, desperate for the money, agreed immediately. The meeting was set for the following Friday at Aunt Karen's lawyer's office. What my parents didn't know was that I would be there too, along with Jake, and we had prepared a few surprises for them. When they walked into that conference room and saw me sitting there, their faces went white. "What is she doing here?" my mom demanded. Aunt Karen smiled sweetly. "Sarah is here because she's part of the family, Linda. And before we discuss any loans, we're going to discuss how this family treats its members." I had prepared a folder with everything. Screenshots of Madison's Instagram post, copies of the emails they had sent me demanding mortgage payments, and a detailed breakdown of every lie they had told me. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steadier than I had ever heard it. "You're going to sit there and listen to everything I have to say, and then you're going to make a choice about what kind of people you want to be." I started with the wedding situation. I read aloud their exact words about not being able to afford anything, about money being tight, about barely making ends meet. Then I showed them the screenshot of Madison's post about her new car. "You lied to me," I said simply. "You looked me in the eye and lied to your own daughter because you decided that Madison's wants were more important than my wedding." My mom tried to interrupt, but Aunt Karen held up her hand. "Let her finish." I continued with the confrontation at their house. "When I came to you, hurt and confused, Madison told me I was begging for something that was never mine. You, Mom, told me I would never be the favorite. And you, Dad, told me to leave before I embarrassed myself further. My father was shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Sarah, you're taking this all out of context. And then, I continued, ignoring him, you sent me your mortgage payment notice and demanded that I pay it, threatening to disown me if I didn't. I slid copies of the email across the table to Aunt Karen, who read it and shook her head in disgust. So here's what I've decided, I said. I'm going to give you exactly what you've given me. Nothing. I stood up and looked at each of them. You made it clear that Madison is your priority, that I'll never be the favorite, that I don't deserve the same treatment she gets. So from now on, you don't get to have a relationship with me while treating me as less than. Aunt Karen spoke up. And as for the loan, Linda and Robert, I'm not giving a penny to people who would treat their own daughter this way. My mom started crying, but they were angry tears. Sarah, you're being unreasonable. Families help each other with bills. You're right, I said. Families do help each other. They help with weddings, they treat their children equally, and they don't lie and manipulate. You taught me that I'm not really family, so I'm acting accordingly. Jake, who had been quiet this whole time, finally spoke up. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, Sarah has been nothing but loyal to this family. She worked multiple jobs in high school to help with household expenses. She never asked for anything she didn't need. She accepted your no about the wedding without arguing. And you've repaid that loyalty by lying to her, favoring her sister, and then demanding she pay your bills. The mortgage payment you're so worried about? I added. It's $1,847 a month. I looked it up. That's less than Madison's car payment on the Jeep you bought her. If you can afford a $600 monthly car payment for Madison's wants, you can figure out your own mortgage. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, my dad spoke up. Sarah, if you walk out of here today, don't expect us to welcome you back. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dad, you already made it clear I'm not welcome. I'm just accepting the situation for what it is. I gathered my papers and stood up. Aunt Karen, thank you for setting this up. Jake, let's go home. As we reached the door, I turned back one more time. Oh, and one more thing. Jake and I are planning to start a family soon. I just wanted you to know that your future grandchildren will know exactly why they don't have grandparents on my side. The look on my mother's face at that moment will stay with me forever. We left them sitting in that conference room, and I felt lighter than I had in months. But the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks later, Madison called me crying. Apparently, without Aunt Karen's loan and without me to pay their mortgage, my parents were facing foreclosure. The bank had started proceedings, and they were panicking. Sarah, you have to help, Madison pleaded. They're going to lose the house. Madison, I said calmly, they made their choice when they decided I wasn't worth $2,000 for my wedding but you were worth $35,000 for a car. They made their choice when they told me I'd never be the favorite. They made their choice when they demanded I pay their bills while treating me like garbage. But it's our family home. It's their house, Madison. They're adults who made adult decisions. They can face adult consequences. A month later, my parents were forced to sell their house. They ended up in a small apartment across town, and Madison had to give up her Jeep because they couldn't afford the payments anymore. I heard through other relatives that they were telling people I had abandoned the family in their time of need. That I was selfish and ungrateful. That they had given me everything growing up and I repaid them by turning my back on them. But you know what? I sleep perfectly at night. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not the one bending over backward to earn love that should have been freely given. I'm not the one making excuses for people who treat me as less than. I'm not the one sacrificing my dignity for people who never valued it in the first place. Jake and I are happy. We're planning to start trying for a baby next year, and we're already talking about how we'll make sure our children always know they're loved equally, unconditionally, and completely. I have a relationship with Aunt Karen now that's deeper than any relationship I ever had with my parents. She's already said she wants to be an honorary grandmother to our future children. And Madison? She reaches out every few months, usually when she needs something. I'm polite but distant. She made her position clear that day when she told me I was begging for something that was never mine. I've simply accepted that our sisterly relationship was never mine either. The hardest part wasn't cutting them off. The hardest part was accepting that the parents I thought I had, the ones who loved me and would sacrifice for me the way I had for them, never existed. I had been in love with an illusion, and it took them showing me their true colors for me to finally see the truth. Some people might say I was too harsh, that families should forgive and forget. But here's what I learned: forgiveness doesn't require you to accept continued mistreatment. Love doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. And family that treats you as disposable isn't really family at all. I chose myself for the first time in my life, and it was the best decision I ever made.